Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of our malicious compliance. Dressed overly casual at a designer store so that the rude sales rep wouldn't get commission. I don't typically buy a lot of designer clothing, but when I do go shopping, I dress pretty casually. Last week I was strolling through the mall and there was designer backpack on display that caught my attention. I went inside the store, wearing a hoodie and ripped jeans, and went to inquire about the price of the backpack. I waited around for 10 minutes for someone to help me until I decided to go up to one of the sales representatives myself. She told me to wait because she was helping another customer, so I sat down and waited. I saw her in the corner of the store just standing, not doing anything. I decided to wait another 5 minutes for her to come back, but she never did. I walked back up to her and told her I wanted to inquire about the backpack. I asked her if she could bring one from the back room so I could take a closer look at it. She told me that she wouldn't be able to do that unless I was planning on purchasing the item. She seemed annoyed with my request. Before I could say anything else, she quickly walked away to help another customer. I'm quite young, 25F, and I could tell she didn't think I was serious about purchasing it and didn't want to waste her time. I would have actually purchased it then and there if she hadn't been so dismissive. A few days later, I went back into the store. This time I made sure to dress it even more casually than before. I walked in with a pair of sweatpants, running shoes, a tank top and zip-up. The same lady was working that day and turned her back to me as soon as I walked in. I went up to one of the other sales representatives. This guy was younger, smiling and seemed eager to help, and I told him I wanted to purchase the backpack and he gladly went inside and got for me. He even asked if I'd like to take a look at it before buying. I thanked him and he checked me out. The store manager was also by the cashier and I let him know that I came in last week and that the lady wouldn't let me see the product before purchasing it. He was upset to hear this and told me this wasn't the first time he had received a complaint about her. The item was a few grand and all the commission went towards the junior. He was so kind and grateful. She avoided eye contact with me after she got told off by her manager and I smiled at her as I walked out of the store. Don't judge a book by its cover. Next story. Continuously kick my seat on flight, get your belongings soaked. This happened a few years ago when I was flying to Canada for a trip. Midway through the flight, I was awakened by the person behind kicking my seat. I thought it was a kid, so I ignored it. After a few minutes of nonstop kicking, I turned around and saw that it was a guy in his mid-20s. I asked him politely to stop and could hear him and his friends snickering, saying something in a language I did not understand. He stopped for a moment but restarted. So I took my water bottle and slowly emptied half of it on top of his backpack that was under my seat. I heard him freak out when we landed and it was satisfying AF. Next story. Friend's evil stepmother dies and what is done with life insurance is awesome. I have a dear friend, Shannon, fake name, in her early 60s, and as a toddler her parents divorced and dad remarried a petty woman, Cruella, who wanted him to cut ties with Shannon. They still managed a relationship, but not as close as it should have been during her years growing up. Shannon married young and struggled a lot but raised her 3 girls into young women who all now have families of their own, and Shannon is now a proud grandmother and great-grandmother. But back to Cruella. When Shannon was still in her 20s and had left her first husband, a cheater and criminal, for her own sanity, and the safety of her and her daughters, her dad had told her to come home and he'd help her with a place to stay. Upon arrival, Cruella, she controlled finances, said she was unwelcome and on her own. Shannon figured it out, and again, the girls grew up healthy and loved, and Shannon remarried a loving man, but for 30 years, she was never allowed to visit her father for Christmas or holidays or birthdays. Cruella died this year. Shannon was invited for Christmas, and her father surprised her by letting her know that he was paying off her mortgage. It could never make up for not being then when she was younger, but it could give her some comfort now that she is retired. When they went to the bank today, she learned where the money came from. It is Cruella's life insurance payout. Cruella would roll over in grave if she knew that her life insurance went to pay off the house of the stepdaughter she wanted to deny existed for nearly her whole life. Next story. Woman with long hair in my husband's lap. I went with my husband and parents to see a theater performance years ago. A small budget thing in a small theater. The seating was very tight for tall people, but we made the best of it. The issue was the woman sitting in front of my husband with long hair that went to her thighs. When she sat down, she put her hair over the chair and into my very tall husband's lap. He had zero legroom, so anything over the chair was coming in his lap. We thought it was unintentional at first. Nope. He politely asked her to move it, she refused. He then kind of plopped it on the floor beside him. With this, she stood up and proceeded to make a scene witnessed by pretty much everyone. As she sat back down, she threw her head and hair in a way that it hit him in his face. My husband gave up too easily. I should have known. I was paying attention to the play. It wasn't until the end that I realized my husband discreetly spent the entire play knotting her hair. Nothing that would need to be cut out, but it would take her a while to undo. He had been braiding and knotting her hair from the bottom up. Definitely not stylish, a thick knot, a mini braid between two knots, a thick knot, a mini braid rolled into a knot, etc. Thick Boy Scout knots basically, over a foot of them. She hadn't noticed. People in rows behind us that had seen her prior outburst saw it and chuckled. My dad saw it and patted my husband on the back. No one literally said a word. Probably took her a few hours to get the knots out. I'm sure the story she tells is a very different version. And I'm sure she's the innocent victim in her version. I would have felt sorry for her had it not been for her attitude. Anyway, figured my husband came out ahead on that one. Next story. The time I was petty during my boss's divorce. So, story time. Around the end of 2017, my boss's wife went through a midlife crisis and decided to have an affair and move out of their house. Divorce proceedings initiated shortly after. In the following March, there was an incident between the two of them that necessitated court intervention, and for them to meet some requirements as a result. One of those requirements was her being required to walk around the house and make a list of all the items that were hers. Cue pettiness on her part. Boss's lawyer stated that, in my 20 years of law practice, I have never seen a list this petty. Half of the dish towels. Half of the paper plate holders. Half of the pots. The curtains in the lounge. Etc., etc. You get the idea. She made sure she got half of everything. However, my boss did not allow her to come into the house herself to unpack, as she had spent the previous 5 months stealing out of the house at every opportunity, and he didn't trust her to pack only her belongings. So, he made me do it, small company, nothing else really for me to be doing, so I dutifully started collating her belongings. This is where the pettiness comes in. She requested one saucepan, I shook both, and one had a loose handle. She got that one. She asked for the curtains in the lounge, she didn't ask for the curtain hooks. So I took all of those out. Half of the dish towels? She got all the grotty mismatched ones, not the nice red set. Half of the containers in the storage room? Never specified she wanted the contents, so she got empty containers. I did this for the entire list, making sure I was as petty as possible when packing up the house. The result. Part 1, once she took all her stuff, she sent a very long letter via her lawyer, stating that what she received was not what was listed in her belongings. We painstakingly went through the entire list, explaining that she received exactly what was written on her list, and we couldn't possibly be at fault, since she wasn't specific enough. Part 2, their divorce was finalized at the end of 2019. Occasionally, we will still get the stray email saying we need to return items to her that weren't provided back in 2018. It makes my petty heart burn bright, knowing that she tried to be a B-word about taking things, and I turned it back on her and ruined it by being extra petty. Edit. I did not behave like this in a vacuum. I did not screw over a kindly woman that I didn't know. No, I'm not dating or married to my boss. I can't believe I have to say this, but not every woman in a divorce is the good party, and women can be evil narcissistic people, just like men. Divorce brings out the worst in people. I'm my boss's personal assistant, and it's my job to read his emails. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Next story. Don't let my fiancé sleep, then you don't get to sleep either. Mobile post apologies for any formatting issues. So my fiancé 25M and his mom, who I'll call Jolene 61F, are on different schedules for work. My fiancé works 10-hour shifts 5 days a week from 3 p.m. to 1 a.m., sometimes even later, and Jolene works part-time 2 days a week from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., because she recently had a knee replacement. So my fiance always seems to get woken up by her at 7 a.m. in the morning because she wants to see him and let him know what's happening that day, and is just loud in general in the morning. And completely disregards the fact that he probably didn't get home until 2 a.m. So in return, whenever my fiance comes home at 2 a.m., he goes into her room to wake her up and tell her all about his day and work and bother her and just be a nuisance to her and interrupt her sleep like she does to him. She still hasn't caught on yet to what we're doing, so there might be a part 2 of the result of us stepping it up a notch and what happens. Next story. Boss went back on their word, manager backstabbed me, so I helped get their store shut down. A few years ago, I got hired on as a general manager for a small, corporate chain specializing in ice cream. They weren't doing well as the pandemic had just ended and they needed someone to boost their sales. I was hired on with the promise that once I doubled the sales of the store, I'd get a substantial pay raise. I hit that goal 5 months into the job. During my 6-month evaluation, I was given a small raise, not even half of what I'd been promised. I was told that the store was still catching up, so they couldn't afford the raise they'd previously quoted to me. If the store continued on its upward track, I'd get my raise at my 1-year evaluation. Yeah, no. I started looking for other jobs and stopped going above and beyond in my duties. The assistant manager I'd hired noticed and took up the mantle, secretly going to my boss to get my job. After a month, it worked. They were going to demote me and promote her to GM before I quit. A few months later, a friend sent me a screenshot of a post on Facebook where a girl was warning people not to work at that shop because they won't pay you. I reached out to her, found out she hadn't been paid for a week's worth of work, and the GM, my old AM, wouldn't do anything about it. The corporate number wasn't publicly listed, but I still had it saved in some emails, so I gave it to her and told her she ought to let corporate know about what's going on in that store. The store was shut down by the end of the next week. It was closed for a month before having a grand reopening with new owners and management. I got revenge in a 2 birds, 1 stone kind of way. Next story. I destroyed my former employer's credibility on Glassdoor, and now they can't fill any positions. I worked for a non-profit with toxic leadership. Nobody was doing exit interviews, so I took over. I told employees to leave a review, but don't leave a 1-star review, because that shows you don't care. Leave a 2-star review, because that shows you care. Winky face. Most companies don't have any 2-star reviews from employees. This company has almost all 2 stars. Toxic workplace is trending in the reviews, rating dropped from 3.4 to 2.4, CEO approval is almost nothing. CEO even planted 5-star reviews in her own company voice and branding, but it wasn't enough. Less than 200 employees, and 30+ empty positions at any given point. She's stepping down at the end of the year, and her statements sounded very scripted and her voice sounded very defeated. Peace out. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel or posts.